The right-wing government was very critical of Biden, saying that he was the one stopping Israel from winning the war. You know, it wasn't our fault. It was those mean Americans, and Donald Trump's going to come and make everything okay. In reality, of course, it's Donald Trump who pressured Netanyahu and the Israeli government into the ceasefire that we see now in Gaza, something that Joe Biden was unable to do because it was a benefit to Netanyahu to be strong against Joe Biden. It's not such a political benefit for him to be strong against Donald Trump, and they're also a little bit scared of him. So I think there's some complexity there amongst the general public. They love Donald Trump. Amongst the kind of elite and opinion formers, there's a lot of nervousness and scepticism that a friend today may not be a friend tomorrow.
And our top story this lunchtime is that the United Nations has asked Donald Trump to reverse sanctions on the International Criminal Court. The US president signed an order to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court and their staff last night, accusing it of illegitimate and baseless actions against America and Israel. The move, of course, was welcomed by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, for whom the ICC has issued an arrest warrant. The ICC said Trump's order sought to harm its independent and impartial work. I'm joined now by Arieh Kovler, a journalist and political analyst based in Israel. Welcome to the show, Arieh.
Thanks for having me.
The obvious question is how the news has been received in Israel.
Well, I think this is something that the Israeli government has been pushing for since before Donald Trump was elected. And indeed, there was a move towards this in Congress, even under previous administrations. So there's a certain amount of celebration and even smugness amongst Israeli leaders that they've got what they wanted on this one.
It's interesting you use the word smug. I mean, obviously, even people who strongly support Israel and the war against Hamas have serious concerns about Benjamin Netanyahu and what happened in Gaza. I mean, is there an element of Israeli public opinion, I don't want to read too much into using the word smugness, but thinks that, anything that kind of helps Netanyahu is a bit annoying?
You might think that, but I think it's one of those rally round the flag situations where even though, polls suggest most Israelis will want to see Netanyahu out and think that he has some level of responsibility for what happened on October 7th and didn't necessarily manage the war terribly well. There's still a sense that, some outside court coming and meddling in our business and telling us what to do is something that the vast majority of the public opposes. And there's a sense that the ICC is being unfair, maybe he's anti-Semitic is a line you will hear a lot, perhaps from people who are reacting instinctively. And so there isn't really a kind of a push here to say, no one was happy to see Netanyahu wanted by the ICC, and so I think that there's a sense here that rather deal with things domestically.
And tell us how sort of we're in the very first weeks of the Donald Trump second presidency. Is there, again, it's an interesting question, isn't it? This feeling in Israel, I presume, is that they are happy to see Donald Trump in the White House as a staunch ally of Israel. Is there, again, a sort of slight split in opinion, on the one hand, welcoming the fact that they've got a die-hard Israeli ally in the White House, but perhaps not welcoming the fact that he might be a Netanyahu ally?
Again, people, even political opponents of Netanyahu, prefer countries that support Israel than countries that oppose Israel, and leaders that support Israel than leaders that oppose Israel. I think there's a certain amount of unfairness towards Joe Biden, who was extremely supportive of Israel over these last period since October the 7th, taking domestic political heat for it. But that hasn't really been reflected well in Israeli public opinion because, while Netanyahu and the right-wing government was very critical of Biden, saying that he was the one stopping Israel from winning the war. It wasn't our fault. It was those mean Americans, and Donald Trump's going to come and make everything okay. In reality, of course, it's Donald Trump who pressured Netanyahu and the Israeli government into the ceasefire that we see now in Gaza, something that Joe Biden was unable to do because it was a benefit to Netanyahu to be strong against Joe Biden. It's not such a political benefit for him to be strong against Donald Trump, and they're also a little bit scared of him. So I think there's some complexity there amongst the general public. They love Donald Trump. Amongst the kind of elite and opinion formers, there's a lot of nervousness and scepticism that a friend today may not be a friend tomorrow.
Excellent. Well, Arieh Kovler, journalist and political analyst based in Israel, thank you for coming on and talking about how the news that Donald Trump has issued sanctions against the ICC and some of its staff last night has been received in Israel.
But nevertheless, it really threatens to undermine international accountability for the worst crimes and deprive victims all across the globe of justice. This executive order puts the United States on the side of war criminals at the expense of victims of grave crimes seeking justice. The question really is, will the International Criminal Court, and with it the promise of international justice, be yet another victim buried in the rubble of Gaza? Or with the support of countries around the world, will it rise from that debris, strengthened and with renewed legitimacy? I think the world has countries that believe in the rule of law, that believe in justice, have an obligation now to stand up, support the court more than ever, and show that just because the court took a step that the United States doesn't like, doesn't mean that the court will be destroyed. The U.S. stance itself is so hypocritical. The same Republicans who applauded the International Criminal Court when it indicted Vladimir Putin, the president of a country that was also not a member of the International Criminal Court, now say, oh, the court has no jurisdiction because Israel is not a member. And the difference, what's interesting in the sanctions law is that it says people will be sanctioned if they contribute to the prosecution of a country that is a U.S. ally. I mean, how more clear can you get about the double standards that you want to impose on the court? I think the court is going to have to hunker down. I think that they're going to be hampered in a lot of their work. I think they're going to, European and other countries are going to have to adopt anti-sanction legislation that protects countries from third-party U.S. sanctions. I think they're going to have to make up for the financial impact that this is going to cause to the court. But I think what they can't do is back down. They can't say, okay, this is it, the court is over. Because if countries do not stand up now, this is the death knell for the court. And it is the death knell for the rule of law. And today it will be the International Criminal Court, and tomorrow it will be the International Court of Justice, and then it will be the European Human Rights Court, and then it will be the United Nations. And, you know, the world has spent so long building this multilateral rules-based order. And it has now is the time to stand up and defend that order.